Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Good morning. It is January 18th. We are under a month away from spring training, and we do have some Mariners news to talk about. So we'll get into that in just 1 second. This is the Northwest Sportscast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, YouTube, make sure to give us a follow, like, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to us on the podcast app. You don't want to miss any of the content coming at you. We're doing daily coverage of all things Seattle sports. If you want an alternative to the radio, or if you just want something in addition to the radio, we got you covered right here in the NW Sportscast. We're talking all things Seahawks, Mariners, Kraken, Sounders, Huskies, a little bit of Storm, a little bit of rain, and maybe even mix in some Washington State Cougars from time to time. So if that is what you were interested in, then this is the place to be. This is the NW Sportscast. Let's get into the show. The Mariners signed Austin Voth yesterday. Austin Voth, a 6-year MLB veteran relief pitcher. He's pitched for the Nationals, pitched for the Baltimore Orioles, and he's a local guy, comes from Redmond, so he is returning now to his home state. Austin Voth is not that great of a player, just all things in general. If you look at his stat page, you don't see a whole lot there that is super impressive. Last year, he pitched to a 5.19 ERA. He was 1-2. Was his record in 25 games, 0 games started, 34 innings, strikes out 34 batters, so pretty solid strikeout per inning ratio there, with an ERA plus of about 80, FIP of 5.10, so the underlying numbers kind of say the same thing. In 2022, he had a little bit of a better year. He had a 4.34 earned run average, but what you really look at is with Baltimore. So he's with Washington in 2022, he had a 10.13 ERA. That is awful in 19 games. But then he went to Baltimore and actually became a starter for them. And in 17 games as a starter for Baltimore, he completely turned his season around with 22 games started, 17 games, and his earned run average was 3.04. So it was really a tale of two seasons for him in 2022, but he actually wasn't all that bad. However, past 2022, you look at 2021, 49 games with the Nationals to a 5.34 ERA, and then in 2020, 11 games started with the Nationals with a 6.34 ERA. His career ERA sits at 4.90. In his career, he has started 39 games and relieved in 100 games. So the chances is that he's going to be a reliever. We did sign him to a major league contract, so he's going to be on the team, which is interesting, or else we would have to waive him. It's a 1-year, $1 million contract, so we're not really breaking the bank here. We're not really breaking the budget, which obviously, the Mariners weren't never going to break the budget this year. That was not one of their goals this offseason, was to spend a bunch of money. So they bring in a guy like Austin Voth, who maybe he's not the top or even in the middle of the reliever section of the free agency class, but what Austin Voth can do is he can contribute. He can throw some innings. It sounds like what they're going to do is they're going to stretch him out at spring training and allow him to be able to be a reliever, but also have the ability to start for us if necessary. And so again, this is just about increasing the floor, increasing the depth, because what the Mariners don't want to happen is a couple injuries derail the season. So now you've got two major league caliber pitchers who, are they going to blow you away? No. But if Logan Gilbert and Brian Wu are both injured at the same time, now you have the option to go to Desclafini, as well as the option to go to Austin Voth, as well as the option to call up Emerson Hancock. So now you kind of have three guys that you can call up / convert to a starter if needed. And that was a role that before the season you only had one, which was Hancock, who we didn't really trust. Easton McGee may also come back. So there's going to be room for these pitchers, and trust me, there will be innings. We're more than likely we will see Austin Voth start games for us because injuries do happen, and it sounds like he's going to be kind of the seventh guy in that starting pitcher depth chart. Well, right now, It's a 5-man rotation. So right now he's not going to be in that starting rotation. He's probably going to start the season in the bullpen. But from there, anything can happen. And yeah, I think he's going to contribute. And, knowing the Mariners, the way that we have converted struggling relievers into dominant relievers, like look at what we did with Paul Sewell. Look at what we did with Taylor Saucedo. Look at what we've done with all the Gabe Spire. Look at what we've done with all these players who've come to Seattle. Drew Steckenrider comes to mind. Come to Seattle, struggling in their careers, and we've converted them into great pitchers, great relievers. And I think there's a chance we could do that again with Austin Voth here. And also, I do think that being back in his home state helps. I think a lot of times, changes of scenery really helps players, especially when they're going back to a place that they've called home for so long. He's from Redmond, so he's really close by. Yeah, this could be a good move. Underrated, good move, which I'm very excited about. And it does bring into question how many guys are in the Mariners bullpen, because there's a lot of dudes that the Mariners have started to acquire for their bullpen. I'm going to pull up the full list because it's at a point now where there's almost too many guys in the Mariners bullpen. But the bottom line is you really can never have too many. So where it stands, this offseason, the Mariners have added Austin Voth, Anthony DeSclafani. They've also traded Jackson Cower was included in that Kelenic trade. Carlos Vargas in the Eugenio Suarez trade. They got Cody Bolton. They signed Ty Buttrey, and then they also added some lower name guys. They claimed off of waivers Mariano Lovera from the Orioles, Jackson Krebiel, as well as a couple other guys, Snead, Diaz, Abbott. So they have added a lot of depth to this bullpen, and they haven't really lost anyone from the bullpen either. All of their guys from last year are still around. And so right now, where I think the bullpen is at, I think you've got Munoz obviously has a job. He's going to be your closer. And Matt Brash is your setup. And then I think Justin Topa is kind of your other high leverage arm. I think Gabe Spire is pretty much a lock to be kind of your left-handed specialist, if you will. And then it sounds to me like DeSclafani is a lock because they want him as their long reliever. That's what they told him. They're paying him too much for him to not be a lock. And then Taylor Saucedo is pretty much a lock as well. So that kind of leaves 2 spots for all of these guys. My guess is opening day, barring injuries, which injuries are very possible, my guess is opening day they're going to give it to the guys on major league deals, which is Trent Thornton and Austin Voth. So that puts you at 8 right there. You got Munoz, Brash, Topa, Spear, DeSclafani, Thornton, Saucedo, Voth. That's a solid group. You've got multiple high leverage arms. The bottom half of that pen does not sound like they are going to potentially be awful. And what's nice is that leaves you with one of the deepest AAA bullpens. Because now your AAA bullpen, like Prelander Baroa and Carlos Vargas, could both be major league guys. So could Ty Adcock. Ty Adcock pitched very well for us last year. You also still have Eduardo Bizardo. You still have Cody Bolton, who you picked up this season, and you still have a very interesting name in Ty Buttrey, who, if you're not familiar with Ty Buttrey, he's the player who we signed him to a minor league deal. He last pitched in 2020, and he retired from baseball 2021, but he came back last year and pitched in AAA, and pitched pretty well in AAA. So Ty Buttrey, so in 2019, he was actually the Angels closer, and he was very good in 2019, but he kind of fell apart in 2020 and then retired. But he's only 31 years old. He could potentially make some noise. I don't think he's on the opening day roster. I think he's probably going to the Rainiers. But if you look back, 2019 season for him, 72 games, 3.98 earned run average with a couple of saves. He has 11 career saves in 3 years with the Angels. So he has experience pitching high leverage. We'll see what comes out of it. It might be nothing. It might be, it might be kind of a Ken Giles thing where he's rehabbing the whole year. Who knows? But it's an interesting move, at least, with a little bit of upside there for a 31-year-old who could definitely contribute to this major league team if he gets into the right spot. All right, I want to talk about the Jared Kelenic thing because Jared Kelenic went on an interview, I believe, with Talkin' Baseball, one of those podcasts, and essentially kind of flamed the Mariners. He basically went out and flamed Jerry Dipoto because, well, I think he's a little bit fed up. So the comments were, two comments in specific that he brought up. He brought up the 54% comment, and he also brought up the comment about the not even prime Babe Ruth could save this team. It could save this offense. That was something that Jerry Dipoto said back in June. And it was interesting. Kelenic, of all the people to say this, I think the fan reaction to this has generally not been good towards Jared Kelenic, which I appreciate that. I think had it been somebody else, had it been a player with a little bit more credibility to his name, it would make a little bit more sense. But Jared Kelenic is the last person who should be talking about maturity and about what he said about Jerry Dipoto being an unneeded distraction. You know what was an unneeded distraction? Oh, I don't know, maybe breaking your foot because you struck out and then had a rage monster incident. Oh, you know what's an unneeded distraction? Maybe it's yelling and screaming every single time you strike out and bringing down the vibes of the dugout, which is, by the way, important. People will tell you vibes don't matter. They do. Momentum, vibes, all that stuff matters. More than people realize, I think. Unneeded distraction? Come on, Jared. You're an unneeded distraction. You were an unnecessary distraction. This kid had one good month. One. In his entire career. And the reaction when he got traded from most Mariners fans that I saw was very negative. It was, why would we trade him? You know, we need to keep Jared Kelenic. He's going to be a superstar. And I said, look, we don't really need Jared Kelenic. And his trade value was at an all-time high this offseason. Now, I didn't like the specifics of the trade because I thought we probably could have gotten more from Jared Kelenic. I thought we should have tried to maybe get an infielder out of that trade or a higher level prospect. I don't know. But, you know, we paired him with Evan White to get rid of his contract because we're cheap. I think if you don't pair him with Evan White, you get a lot more for Jared Kelenic. But that's a whole other conversation. But I was fine trading him because I don't think we need that presence in the locker room. I think he clearly is the most negative guy on that team. And so when you talk about an unneeded distraction, I'm not sure if he necessarily is the right guy to do that. Now, if J.P. Crawford or if Cal Raleigh, Cal Raleigh kind of has. If J.P. Crawford, Julio, one of those guys, George Kirby, was to come out and say, yeah, like, we were all a bit fed up with Jerry Dipoto, that would be a lot more newsworthy, I think. But those guys haven't said anything like that. Now, maybe that is how they're feeling. Maybe there really is a kind of attitude of contempt towards Jerry Dipoto because of some of his comments. If that's the case, then we have an overarching problem in Seattle of the team doesn't have much of a backbone. Prime Babe Ruth wouldn't even fix this offense. That's what Jerry Dipoto said. And according to Jared Kelenic, people in the clubhouse were mad at that. Well, let's look at the numbers. At that point, the Mariners were below 500, and they were like the 24th or 25th best offense in the MLB with a very negative point differential. And the team was mad that the general manager says that the offense was bad, which it was bad. Grow up. I'm sorry. You chose to do this. I choose to talk about sports. So, I get negative comments and, I have to deal with them. I don't let it get to my head. People disagree with what I say every single day. If I let that get to my head, I wouldn't be able to talk on YouTube for multiple hours sometimes a day. I wouldn't be able to do that if I let other people's negativity get to my head. No, people are going to say whatever. These guys chose to play professional baseball. That was the decision that they made. If the general manager of your team saying a factual statement about the team struggling causes that much controversy in the clubhouse, I worry about the mental fortitude of some of these guys. But we already knew Jared Kelenic didn't have a great mental fortitude because he throws temper tantrums every time he gets out and causes himself to get injured and miss multiple months of the season because of it. So I'm operating with the belief that it was just Jared Kelenic and that it wasn't Jerry Dipoto, or that it wasn't the rest of the players who were mad at Jerry Dipoto. I think Kelenic was mad at him, and I said they're going to trade him because there's issues there that go beyond the baseball field, and there are. And look, he could go off in Atlanta. He could be great in Atlanta. I don't think he will, but there's a chance. And if he does, I'm probably still going to defend trading him because I think that was the right move. I really do. Now, does Jerry Dipoto have some problems? Yeah. Could he be better at public speaking? Yes. Could he be better at getting his message across to the fans? Absolutely. But in this case, I'm kind of on his side because Jared Kelenic really wasn't the guy who should be talking about distractions and that sort of thing. Because Jared Kelenic himself might have been the biggest distraction to this team last year. Your boss tells you you're doing a bad job at work. What do? You might get a little bit frustrated for a day. Then after that, you pick up the pace, right? You pick up the pace and work harder and get better at your job. So I don't think that Jerry Dipoto's comments caused a clubhouse mutiny the way that Jared Kelenic might want us to think. I think he was mad, but we already know he was mad. So not much of a story. But good for Jared Kelenic for getting these interviews and getting his word out there. I'm proud of the kid. But I think the backhanded kind of remarks about his former team, kind of similar to what Paul Sewald did. It's not a great look, just as far as maturity. Because the mature thing to do is to walk away from the Mariners and say, look, what's in the past is in the past. Now I'm going to be better with my new team. Instead of, well, the Mariners, when I was in the Mariners, Jerry Dipoto, it's a rough clubhouse. Nobody cares anymore, dude. You're not on the team. Focus on the Braves now. That's my take. That is my take. All right. Not a whole lot else to talk about today. There really isn't. Man, No big Seahawks news, no big Huskies news. The Kraken lost 2 days ago to the Rangers 5-2. Hopefully they get back on their winning streak soon. Yeah, not a whole lot of news though, man. All right, I guess that means we'll get into my daily rankings. Today, the daily ranking, we're going to be ranking the top 5 coaching candidates that I believe the Seattle Seahawks should be targeting this offseason. All right, let's get into it. Starting off with number 5. I'm not sure if this guy is interested or getting interviews because I haven't seen him linked to anything. But when I look at his resume, he seems like the perfect fit. He's coached with the Seahawks for 7 years. He was our wide receivers coach. He worked with guys like Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse, Golden Tate, Tyler Lockett. He made those players good. He also coached Russell Wilson as the quarterback coach. Russell Wilson enjoyed some of his best seasons with this guy as his quarterback coach. Then he becomes the passing game coordinator for Geno Smith. In 2022, Geno Smith had a career year. And then this year he goes to Tampa Bay, where he leads Baker Mayfield in an elite career season as their offensive coordinator and takes them as one of the top 8 teams in the league. And he runs that team's offense because their head coach is a defensive guy. So he's essentially the guy in charge of the Bucs offense. And the Bucs offense was better this year with Baker than it was last year with Tom Brady. If you don't know who I'm talking about Dave Canales. And he's very young. He's only been an offensive coordinator for 1 season, so I understand why he's not getting as much hype as some of these other guys. But boy, oh boy, does this guy stand out to me as somebody who I think the Seahawks could go out and hire. Dave Canales, man. He's a good coach. Number 4, another guy who really hasn't been getting much attention, but I think he would be perfect. He had made the Ravens offense this season into a juggernaut. They went from a team that was struggling to score points. Lamar was struggling, especially the passing offense. This season, once they brought this guy in as their offensive coordinator, their offense has skyrocketed to be one of the top in the league. I'm going with Todd Monken, Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. I think he'd be great. He's innovative. He's a run-the-ball-first guy, but he makes that passing game look so good. He works really well with young, mobile quarterbacks. Geno Smith's not really mobile, but you could draft somebody. And that's kind of what we're getting at. All right, number 3. If you watch the Texans against... Who was it? Now I don't even remember. The Texans against the Browns. If you watch that playoff game, going into it, the storyline was the Browns have a great defense and the Texans have a rookie quarterback. So the Browns are probably going to win. Right? Wrong. Because this guy, that offensive coordinator, who has worked with Kyle Shanahan for many years in the past, both with Washington, Atlanta, and San Francisco. One of the youngest offensive coordinators in the NFL. This guy took the Houston Texans this year to the next level. Of course, I'm talking about Bobby Slowick. Come on, man. Bobby Slowick. Get this guy to Seattle. I'm not sure if they've reportedly requested to interview him yet, but they should. And I hope that they will, because he is an absolute genius offensively. The things that he does. He gets these guys so far open. Like, I'm watching guys 15, 20 yards down the field, wide open, nobody near them. I think he'd be a perfect hire. He could be a perfect hire. Again, all 3 of these guys I'm a little leery of just because this was their first year as offensive coordinators. So you want to see a little bit more sustained success. That's why they are 5-4-3, and they're not at the top of my list. Let's get to the top of my list now. Here we go. Number 2. This guy has made Tua Tagovailoa look like an MVP. Has studied under Mike McDaniel. Studied with Kyle Shanahan as well. This guy has taken part in what I think might be the most creative offense in the NFL. I'm talking about the Miami Dolphins' second-year offensive coordinator, Frank Smith. Frank Smith has been getting a ton of buzz for head coaching. He's interviewed already with the Falcons and with the Panthers, and the Seahawks have requested to interview him as well. I think he'd be a really solid hire if we miss out on my number 1 guy. Because Frank Smith learned a lot from Kyle Shanahan, learned a lot from Mike McDaniels, and that offense in Miami, for the first 14 weeks of the season, so good. Now, they fell off at the end because this is a warm weather team. They can't play in the cold. I think Seattle could solve that problem. And the way that he made Tua, an undersized, not very great quarterback, he's only very good at being accurate, that's his main trait. And he took that into literally making him look like prime Drew Brees this year. How could you not want some of that on your team? Imagine what he could do with Geno. Imagine what he could do with a rookie quarterback. Come on, Seattle. Make it happen. But finally, number 1, the guy that I most would like to be the Seattle Seahawks' next head coach. I've talked about him for so long on this podcast. Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Please, Seattle, bring Ben Johnson in to be your next head coach. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. Just give him more money than Washington. He'll come around. He has been so good. So good. You know, when he became the Lions play caller, they were the worst offense in the NFL 3 years ago. The minute he took over, they were in the top 10, and they've been top 10 ever since. He's been calling plays for them for 2.5 years now, and look what he's done with them. He has made Jared Goff look like an MVP. He has made this Lions team look so special and got them to the final 8 and likely the final 4. If they can beat Tampa, they'll be in the final 4. He's got the mind. He studied under guys like Sean Payton, Darrell Bevell, Joe Philbin. Solid offensive minds in this league are the types of guys that he has studied with. The one reservation is he doesn't come from the Shanahan tree. But I don't think that's the end-all be-all. Shanahan tree has produced some really nice coaches, but Ben Johnson could be one that comes from a different tree. And Ben Johnson seems like he'd be a really, really good hire. He also comes from the Lions and Dan Campbell's culture, which I think would be a great culture to bring in. It's kind of similar to Seattle's. It's a player first. It's a tough culture, but it's also player first. That is the type of thing that I like. I think Seahawks, it was definitely player first. I think they lacked a bit of toughness towards the end. And so I think we need to bring a little bit more of that toughness back. Maybe Ben Johnson could be the guy to do that. So ultimately, that is my top 5. Top 5 candidates to replace Pete Carroll as a Seahawks head coach. You'll notice all 5 offensive guys. All 5 offensive coordinators. Yeah, that's who I want. I want an offensive coordinator. Like, you know what? Mike Vrabel, Dan Quinn, Mike McDonald, sure, they seem like they'd be fine. I wouldn't be mad if we hired them. But also, I think what we need to do is hire an offensive coach, and I would prefer any of those 5 offensive coaches over the best defensive coach. Because I think if you want to compete in the NFL these days, more often than not, it's the offensive coaches who are winning. if you look at the league, 14 offensive coaches right now in the NFL. 11 of them had winning records. 11 of them. And the 3 that didn't, Kevin O'Connell, who obviously Kirk Cousins got hurt. So can you really blame him? Brian Daboll, who again, Daniel Jones got hurt. So can you really blame him? And the last one was, who was it? It was, I'm trying to rack my brain now. Somebody in the AFC. Oh, Sean Payton was the other one. And he, for what it's worth, turned around Denver and got them damn near close to a winning season. So offensive coaches have just been more successful than defensive coaches. And there's a few defensive coaches who are in the playoffs. Sean McDermott's there. Mike Tomlin made it, lost. Todd Bowles. There's some defensive guys who make the playoffs. But generally, the trend of the league is offense. 7 out of the last 10 Super Bowls, offense. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Doug Peterson. Those are the guys winning Super Bowls. Bruce Arians. Belichick and Pete Carroll are the only 2 defensive head coaches to win Super Bowls since, I believe, 2008, I think. It's been a while. Mike Tomlin won it in 2008, I think. So yeah, there's, outside of the legendary defensive guys, Belichick, Carroll, who by the way are now both not coaches anymore. Belichick might be again soon. But outside of those guys, defensive coaches are not winning Super Bowls. It's offensive coaches. That's who's winning these Super Bowls. I think Seattle needs to go in that direction. I really do. And I will die on that hill. All right, that's going to do it for the show today. Thank you all for listening. This was the Northwest Sportscast. I hope you all have a great day. Leave a comment if you would like. Tell me, what am I wrong about? What am I right about? All that good stuff. We'll see you guys in the next one.